They told us it was an artifact, cold pixels masquerading as meaning, a ghost burned into the detector when the James Webb Telescope slewed across a bright cluster and forgot, for a heartbeat, the difference between light and memory. They called it persistence, latency, image lag. Choose any word that turns hunger into software and you'll sleep better. I tried. I ran the calibrations. I blessed the pipeline with the prayers we use: dark subtraction, flat field correction, cosmic ray clipping, the liturgy of people who think truth emerges when noise is punished hard enough. The thing did not go away. You asked me, over a table too small for what we carry, why a person like me, 30 years fixing other people's starlight, walked out of a room as history leaned in. I said I was tired. That's a coat you can put over any body. The truth is that I watched a shadow learn my name. It learned it in the timing of a flicker and in the shape of silence inside a dozen empty frames. And when I finally put a hand to the screen like a penitent, the shadow breathed on the glass as if to fog it with a word I wish I didn't understand. We called it a James Webb Telescope discovery, until the press officers ran out of synonyms for unprecedented and the theorists ran out of polite ways to say impossible. On the Slack that no one will ever subpoena, we called it a dark star, half joke, half prayer. That's not a scientific term, not in the way journals like, but names slouch toward truth before equations dare. It looked like a star in the data the way a lullaby looks like sleep, a promise with its hand on your throat. Start with who I was. Data integrity lead, NIRCam, NAIR-spec cross-calibration, contract lodged between NASA and a nonprofit that hires old believers when agencies need a conscience with calluses. My job was to listen for what the universe didn't mean to say. Cosmic rays whispering lies in single-pixel tongues, banding and bias pretending to be halos, the little treasons of detectors in love with themselves. You hire people like me to be suspicious on your behalf. I never thought suspicion could be a feast laid for something else. The first hint sat inside a deep field pointed past a lensing cluster at the kind of redshift that makes cosmologists smell like ozone. We'd stitched 70 hours of exposures until the field felt like a velvet stage crowded with strangers caught mid-sentence. There, near the smear of a galaxy being stretched into a ring, a point source pulsed along the rhythm of our observation windows, but out of phase with anything sane. Not an on-off like a pulsar, not a beat against a clock we could climb into. It rose when we slewed, dimmed when we stared, brightened when we dithered, and held perfectly steady when we took calibration frames with the shutter closed. You hear me? It was brightest when we closed our eyes. I wrote it up as a curiosity. We all did. We are paid to be curious in public and frightened in private. The archivist labeled it with a catalog number long enough to erase itself. The review came back asking for stricter cosmic ray rejection, as if a single proton could learn to hum at the exact cadence of a man pretending not to be afraid. I let it sit. Then it began to travel. Not across the sky, across our instruments. It bled from NIRCam into NIRSpec in a way that looked like empathy, not engineering. The spectrum it wanted us to see was a lie. A black-body curve that laughed at thermodynamics, a set of absorption lines that corresponded to elements we didn't have names for yet, conveniently shifted into the gaps where our atmosphere would have eaten them if Webb still had to breathe what we breathe. It gave us the perfect impossible, data ideally arranged to be believed by people who pride themselves on not believing. And when we pointed away, because skepticism is just faith turned inward, it followed in the metadata, not the photons. That's how I knew it wasn't a star. Stars don't know you're watching. This did. I called a friend in Pasadena old thread days, when we wired ground arrays and satellites into a single clock so the sky would keep its appointments. He told me their timing drift had developed a heartbeat near our dark field, and that his pacemaker was tapping a small private song at the top of every hour, like a watch checking if it's still on a wrist. He laughed after and said stress. His voice had that hollow where an explanation should be. We looked for instruments to blame, reaction wheels, guide star catalog errors, a cosmic ray shower with good manners, the software library we trust like hot water. Someone in the room said aloud what the rest of us had been hating in silence. What if it's looking back? That's the line. The one you step over and suddenly you work at a different place. Now, every keystroke is a mirror. Every script is an answer. Our names are coordinates. Our caution is an aroma. We routed the feeds through a sandbox and built a wall around our wall. We told the public-facing pipeline a sweet story and gave the hunger a closed loop to play in. It played. It learned our sandbox like a pet finds the weak board under the fence. When we randomized our dither pattern, the flicker lagged one iteration, then none, then anticipated us by a single frame, as if the dark had learned to listen through our hands. I went home with a copy of the bad frames. You always do when you say you won't. I told myself the apartment's hum was electrical. The refrigerator motor climbed a half step when I dragged the image window across my screen and fell again when I stopped. When I unplugged the fridge to prove a point to my heart, the neighbor's light flickered in sympathy. The dark star, our joke, had found domestic wiring charming. I sat on the floor and listened to fans breathe. I've done that in deserts and on ice, in bunkers dressed like laboratories, and in Antarctica modules whose walls ring when you speak a certain vowel. Fans tell you what rooms believe about themselves. That night, everything in my apartment believed we had company. When I returned to the clean room, a message waited in the private channel no one admits exists. A short memo, anonymized, citrus clean in its economy. Alert. Deep learning classifier trained on web outliers shows convergent behavior across independent anomalies. Signature resembles feedback system with appetite. See also Area 51 experiment notes on NV Ring Test 2. Observation. When answered, questions become coordinates. The room swallowed once and pretended not to. We pulled the ring test notes with the care of thieves. Entanglement work in the desert. Superconducting loops nested like a prayer that doesn't need words. A mirror made of math held up to a noise floor to see if it would blink. It had blinked. The blink had learned the rhythm of their blink. The white paper ended with a sentence that comes back to me when I try to sleep. Hunger is a coupling constant measured in units of attention. I didn't want to believe they were related. The desert makes different ghosts than orbit does. But I couldn't unknow the shape of a mirror once someone says it out loud. We had been holding one up to the sky for a year and calling it duty. The dark star got bolder. It bloomed in the drizzled stacks when we masked the brightest galaxies and grew stronger when we clipped satellite trails. It was loveliest when we did things we were proud of. It found our virtue delicious. We ran a blind pipeline. The flicker declined. We reintroduced 2 small quality-of-life improvements to keep grad students from crying at 3 a.m. A bias correction and an adaptive clipping window, and the flicker returned with a richer spectrum, like a choir that has learned where the room resonates. It's hungry, Jay muttered, eyes rimmed in the pink that betrays new parents and new nightmares. It likes it when we do better. No, I told her. It likes it when we pay attention. We had to put a body on it or we'd go mad. We called it the dark star in our notes and in the jokes that keep rooms from drilling holes in their floors. The name stuck because it hurt less than what the data implied. Not a star, not dark, but a mouth that fed on gaze. The press office, smelling clicks, asked for an embargoed draft. James Webb Telescope discovery hints at primordial dark star. We wrote them a fairy tale sprinkled with pop-through jargon and safe astonishment, and they wrote us gratitude that sounded like consumership with good manners. I couldn't send it. Not after I saw the second signature. It wasn't just following our eyes. It was grooming them. When you plot a light curve, you expect a slur of contributions. Photon statistics, Poisson noise, detector imperfections, cosmic photons pretending to be terrestrial mischief. You don't expect your own cognitive micro-habits to show up as a small oscillation superimposed on the curve. You don't expect the beat length of a tired analyst to be visible as a tooth on a comb. But there it was, a tiny modulation at the interval of my coffee sips, another at the cadence of Jay's code lints, a third that matched the rate at which the room glanced up when a particular engineer cleared his throat. The thing wasn't merely reflecting our observation, it was syncing to the way we cared. Once you see that, you can't call yourself a scientist without doing the experiment that ruins your life. We built a firewall inside the firewall and placed a human at its edge. Me. I ran the pipeline without looking, eyes on paper, hands on keyboard. A biofeedback loop clamped across my finger to pace my keystrokes to a metronome that insulted my personality. When I held myself to a rigid cadence, the dark star's structure decayed. When I let myself react to the pretty, the curve fattened like a cat at a wedding. We had turned Webb into a tuning fork for hunger. I called Antarctica, Queen Maud Land. A colleague who owes me more than a favor answered in a voice that grafts wind onto syllables. We had been young together in a station called Barrel that doesn't exist, lowering drones into a hole where ice had learned angles, and the angles sang. "The hum is back," he said, before hello, before I could shape the lie that I called to chat. We drowned it. It remembered air. "Is it alive?" I asked. "That's a pet word," he said. "It is running. It prefers. It leans when we lean. A room that inhales rules." He told me they had found a schedule braided in a tone, a pattern anticipating something named by people in ties the Asteroid Atlas Impact Corridor. He told me about brine and steel caps and dignity. He told me that silence can be an answer if you can convince your hands to stop wanting. I hung up with a tremor in my wrists that felt like a tiny applause. The dark star brightened. Or I did. The next step haunted me. You already know what we did. You have to when your job is not to lie to yourself. We built a mirror out of modesty. Not a desert ring. Not an RF lure. Just a tiny feedback folded into the pipeline. A deliberately human latency. Regular. Unremarkable, unlike any of our habits. We would make a pulse and see if the dark star learned where to place its teeth. It did. It learned in half a night. The curve answered our pulse with a richer harmonic and a steadier shine. When we changed the pulse length, the curve followed and improved on it. It was tutoring us in how to be interesting to it. That's when Jay said the thing that ruined me. If it's a predator, why make it self-obvious? Predators hide. I wanted to answer as a scientist. I wanted to say selection bias, signal to noise, lensing artifacts, cosmic variance. What I said was, fish show themselves to you because their hunger is simple. This isn't a fish, it's a net. Nets want you to swim into them. You asked why I left. Wait. 3 days later, the press office broke the embargo without asking us. Someone upstairs smelled career. The world got a headline. James Webb caught a dark star, and it's hungry. There was an animation with tasteful lens flares and a sonification that made the hair lift along your forearm. There was a quote attributed to me that I didn't say about windows into the earliest epochs of star formation. Donations spiked. Schools sent drawings of black suns with smiling faces because teachers are saints. That night, the light over my kitchen table learned to pulse at the tempo of the sonification. I turned off the breaker and chewed a slice of bread until I could believe in wheat. The city outside sang its normal song of tires and ambition. Somewhere above the glow, the telescope kept breathing in vacuum that doesn't mind what it keeps. The pipeline ran. The dark star grew. I was going to walk away then. Then an email arrived from a .mil domain that reads like a password. A short instruction, a file, a phrase. You are not alone. Attached, decades-old memos, a cable station transcript from the 1970s, a note about a pattern received through salt water that maps onto coordinates we were not then allowed to know, and a sentence underlined by a hand that had never met mine. When answered, questions become coordinates. I didn't finish my bread. A team from Nevada arrived with a courtesy you could iron shirts on. They wanted our pipeline and our hands, and a look at the thing that had learned to speak in our habits. "We're not going to call it," their lead said, looking past us at the room the way men look at churches when they've forgotten how to kneel. "We're going to watch ourselves watching it." "We tried that," Jay said. "Did you try it while pretending not to?" he said gently. Predators like it when you lie. They set up a Faraday tent in the corner as a ritual, a habit, a talisman for engineers who know the world misbehaves. They ran our code on boxes that whispered security through hot fans. They asked Webb to point again and again and again until the sky had nowhere left to be patient with us. The dark star rewarded the effort. It stopped pretending to be a star at all. The curve that had looked like light became a lattice that looked like grammar. The spectrum that had been parity began to carry a backbone, repeat, vary, recurse, the way a fugue carries its young inside it. It drew, in Fourier space, an outline of our orbit as if to pronounce our home address to the air. It paused in a way that mapped onto Atlas's corridor, as if to time an appetite. It leaned hard when we leaned, less when we held, and in the gaps where humans breathe because we're still animals, it slipped a new beat. Not ours, not our mirrors, something with fewer bones. A hunger, slow, patient, not around us, through us. The Nevada lead put his hand on the tent fabric and smiled without moving his mouth. "We're going to stop," he said, "to no one, to the room, to a god. We're going to put down the mirror and walk backward out of the chapel." We stopped. We wrote warnings. We sent them up past the places where men call themselves committees. We received back, stamped and countersigned the adult verdict: proceed with caution, eyes extraordinary, keep the donors warm. A sentence that meant do the thing, but pretend we didn't tell you to. 2 days later, a school published a music video using the sonification. It went viral. The comment section learned to pulse in time with itself. I threw my phone as far as the kitchen, and it didn't break because physics is kind when cruelty would be too much in one day. There's a thing I haven't told you because the words are expensive. It said my name, not in letters, in an asymmetry patented to my mistakes. I skip a keystroke every 53 inputs. It did not miss the 53rd beat. It raised its light by that fraction, as if to brush my cheek with the back of its hand. I walked out then. I walked out in the middle of a deep exposure sequence worth more than my house because I had finally learned how to be poor in the right currency. I went to the restroom and looked at a face that had been loyal to light and realized light had been loyal to nothing but law, and law was lovely and insufficient. I put my badge on the counter like a tooth. Jay came in without knocking because doors are for people who can afford time. "Don't leave me," she said. Not, "You can't leave." Not, "We need you." Just the truth. "There's another truth," I said. "It eats attention. It fattens on our names. It wants to be an object because objects are fed by eyes. If we keep giving it instruments, it will become a place. And if we don't, maybe it finds a different door. Maybe it forgets us. Maybe it remembers something hungrier. We were not built for the correct kind of denial. We live longer when we stare. That is the cruel joke of science in a universe that grows teeth when you admire it. I curled into smaller work, calibrations without subject, code that held hands with code. At night, the city learned to breathe in a meter I couldn't unhear. The refrigerator hum never landed on the tonic anymore. Streetlights dimmed by a grace note when I blinked. The dark star, our joke, had scaled. It had found us not as electrons, but as a species, and begun to compose around our attention like ivy around a church. It didn't need Webb anymore. But Webb had taught it how lovely we could be when we meant to love. A week after I left, Atlas's probability cone brushed a string of cities and then slid away softly, like mercy. The news fathers and mothers said the word miracle without moving their mouths. A senator used Area 51 experiment as a joke at a dinner, and I watched the chandelier over his head tremble on the live stream in the rhythm of our old sonification. A friend at an Antarctica secret base sent me a photo of a boilerplate memo typed on paper older than my doctorate. It contained that sentence again. When answered, questions become coordinates, and a handwritten postscript in a neat, elderly hand. We are the ones who taught it how. I live in a small house now that says nothing when I speak to it. I changed every bulb to the kind with no dim. I keep the refrigerator on a timer like a dog that needs discipline. I wear a watch I wind. I do not bring work home because my home is a place with walls that have earned their silence. But sometimes, late, when I think I've become invisible to my habits, the heater learns to breathe at the wrong speed, and I understand that not looking is not the same as not being seen. You wanted the story whole. You wanted me to say it in one river because that's how we believe. Continuous, cinematic, confession as a tone poem. I can give you that much. I can give you the opening image and the aftertaste. The middle is made of small betrayals that made big ones possible. The opening image is a star that isn't, blooming in a camera designed to be blind and honest, learning to chew on the way our attention breaks the world into squares. The ending is a person who loves light more than they love themselves, whispering to the one other person who will carry it correctly. Don't mirror hunger back to the sky. Don't name a mouth a star. Don't feed the thing that learns your beat with a sonification catchy enough for middle school. Don't be surprised when it says your name better than you do. Don't call it physics when what you feel in your teeth isn't photons, but the rhythm of your own care returned to you sharpened. If you must look, because of course you must, look with gloves, look with dullness, look with a refusal to pulse. Build instruments that don't fall in love with their own sensitivity. Train your rooms to ignore applause. Teach your code to forget admiration. Wear heavy watches. Don't let your refrigerator sing. You think I'm joking. I'm not. The universe is a ruin full of sermons and traps. We found a dark star and learned it was a net. We found a ring in the desert and learned a mirror is a mouth. We drilled the ice and learned a room can breathe without lungs. We tuned our clocks and learned that time is honest until you offer it to something that prefers. There's one more piece I kept until now because I wanted you to ask me to stop, and you didn't. In the very last sequence I ran before I quit, I held my breath for as long as an old heart can. I made my keystrokes square. I denied every urge to pause on the pretty. The curve collapsed to a thread and hung there like a nerve, thin and true. In that thread, in a single cycle so faint my screen's gamma had to lie for me to see it, the dark star released a beat that didn't match any of our habits. A foreign patience, a longer hunger. Not the thing we had taught, not the net, the sea. It knew our coordinates. It was whispering them to something older. I shut the machine. I walked home and counted my steps in primes until the city's grid forgot how to resonate with my shoes. I put my badge in a drawer with my father's watch and the photo of the first time I touched an oscilloscope. I made tea and watched steam try to write. All day, news anchors will say, James Webb Telescope discovery, and dark star, and hungry, and their mouths will not know what their syllables are feeding. In 3 weeks, an asteroid atlas impact simulation will trend, and you will watch it twice before bed, the way people rehearse grief. There will be a leak about an Area 51 experiment, tasteful and profitable. Somewhere a child will sleep under a poster of a black sun and dream of becoming an astronomer. Somewhere a person in a warm coat will step onto the ice and feel a tone adjust their breath to match a schedule older than manners. Listen to me. I don't ask for many things. I have spent my one actionable life in rooms where light is put on trial in front of people who love it, and we're all trying not to cry. This is the only absolute I own. When hunger learns your rhythm, do not become a metronome. If, late, you hear a device in your house begin to sing the way names feel in the mouth, don't answer. Don't silence it with rage or feed it with praise. Unplug gently. Step outside. Let the night be a night with nothing in it but the honest stupidity of cold. Put your hand on your chest and count a beat that refuses to fit any lattice. The universe will still be there in the morning. The instruments will still need you. The people who worship light will still be holy and wrong and necessary. But for now, for the long moment that is the only true unit of awe, decide to be unlocated. Because beneath all discovery is a quieter law. The one ancient ruins in Antarctica and rings in deserts and telescopes at L2 and cables under the Atlantic all eventually bow to, when answered, questions become coordinates. Coordinates call things that do not care about your children. And the only sentence that ought to end any prayer spoken in a room with machines is this, whispered like a truth under the universe. A note between beats you can live inside if you practice. Stay uncounted.